Alright, today we're gonna tackle two beastly phones, one Dimensity 9500 and another Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, and break down in detail their gaming performance, see how they manage the temperature, and hopefully we can answer which chip is the winner this generation. Selamat pagi, good morning everyone, Kenneth here and welcome to my gaming test of the OPPO Find X9 Pro versus the Xiaomi 17 Pro Max. Two latest flagship with a very different chip decision, one from Qualcomm where it supports emulation much better, with Mediatek as the underdog that keeps on delivering with every single yearly release. A quick note though, if you're looking for emulation test, I won't go there due to potential copyright issues. I personally don't play emulator as well, but what I can give you is in-depth insight on heavy mobile games like Wuthering Waves, Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, and Delta Force. Please don't ask me where is COD Mobile, where is PUBG anymore, because they are going to play at max graphics, max FPS all the time, and that includes all the mobile games as well. Okay, hit the thumbs up and subscribe for more videos like this, and let's get started with the first game, which is Wuthering Waves at highest quality preset with 60 FPS frame rate setting. I've compiled the data from my ratings list into neat little graphs here, and we can see that we reached the point of diminishing return ever since the 8 Elite last year. As you can see, when comparing both OPPO and Xiaomi to the iQOO 13 that uses 8 Elite Gen 4 here technically, the result we get is already within margin of error, which is a clear improvement over the slightly older Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 that I have on Vivo X Fold 5 here. I did my standard test run with boss fights or tacit field farming, then followed by open world exploration, so it should be more accurate of real world gaming that you'll do on a daily basis. One little thing I noticed though is the OPPO uses slightly more power at 5.3 watts average compared to 4.8 watts on the Xiaomi, and the peak wattage is also slightly higher at 7.3 watts on the OPPO compared to 6.8 watts on Xiaomi. And throughout the run we can see that Mediatek CPU is running harder, with some cores being utilized more than 90% here, whereas the Xiaomi it barely touches it. And in the FPS graph we can see that the OPPO is still struggling a little bit more than Xiaomi, or it has almost 60 FPS variance between the highest and the lowest point compared to just 30 FPS on Xiaomi. So the overall graph doesn't look as straight of a line here. But to be honest with you, while I game, I don't really notice the lags, so to say. The OPPO still handles the game very well, with good temperatures too at just 37 degrees Celsius max compared to 40 degrees on the Xiaomi. Both got above 95% smoothness, which is good, and the 5% low FPS are still above 30 FPS. Actually, I didn't expect this kind of performance just a few years away from Galaxy S24 Ultra. Really struggled with this game, dropping down to 16 FPS at times, so I'm really happy to see this progress. By the way, I've made a tutorial on how to install the Scene app so you can test the FPS by yourself. I'll link them in the description as well. And if you're buying anything, I'd really appreciate your support through the affiliate links in the description, so thank you very much. And let's move on to the second game, which is Honkai Star Rail. So this time, actually the tables flipped. We got very similar average frame rate and power, both around 5.1 watts, and did reach up to 10 watts at times. So calculating the efficiency score, they're about the same too, and definitely better than last year's phones. Temperatures wise, I started the Xiaomi test run closer to 40 degrees, which is not ideal for comparison, but we can see that it's still managing temperature well, performing similarly compared to the much cooler OPPO here. But here's where it gets interesting, as I have another test run where I played 1 hour of Divergent Universe followed by some farming. Here you can really see how the phone manages temperature over time. At around 10 minutes mark, it throttles down to 45 FPS. Then after the phone reaches 40 degrees, it throttles even more, and this time straight up limiting power to 2 watts, so you can see the orange temperature line trends down until the 30 minutes mark here. Then after that, we can see the phone is just doing whatever, with huge variance in every metric, be it FPS or frame time, or even the power after around 35 minutes into the game. So if you want to avoid this, you can reduce the settings or get a phone cooler instead, like this FlyDG, which is a very nice cooler. Otherwise, I'm pretty impressed about the temperature that only maxed out at 41 degrees Celsius. So no, the phone does not overheat even under prolonged heavy gaming use. Now, on the Xiaomi side. I actually kept on playing, and here's the result. In average frame rate, the smoothness score, as the first 10 minutes, they are exactly the same performance. Even the average power rose up to 5.7 watts. But the downside is the battery temperature kept on increasing all the way to 46 degrees, that at the end of the 20 minutes mark, the phone is very hot, and I decided to stop and cool the phone down. And if this happens to you, you should do the same as well, because heat is battery's biggest enemy. And I'm doing these stress tests so you don't have to, and you know when to take breaks. And at the end of the day, phones are passively cooled device that will always have a thermal capacity limit, except for the Red Magic, of course, that has active cooling on it. It's up to the manufacturer how aggressive they want to keep their performance. And if you've been following the tech field, you know Xiaomi and Poco has been known to go all out in the past. So the 17 Pro Max is no different. But we know that Oppo caters more to the general audience, and mostly they don't want their phone to get too warm, which is good for the battery in the long term, and that's why you see the thermal throttling right there. Okay, moving on to the next game, we got Genshin Impact, which continues to push the limits of mobile processors even years after its launch. And here we got a glimpse of Qualcomm's advantage in terms of optimization, because this game has been around for a very long time. So not only the average FPS that's higher even in the iQOO 13, the stability or the smoothness score above 45 FPS is also higher across the board with Qualcomm chips. I don't know why the variance is 162 FPS here on the Oppo, because technically that's impossible since we only have 60 FPS total, but otherwise it's not as smooth as you can see in the graph right here. Not only that, Mediatek also uses slightly more power, averaging at 4.7 watts with 11.5 watts peak. That's the highest so far, compared to just shy of 10 watts between the two Qualcomm phones. So I'm rooting for Mediatek to keep on improving here, and generally all three of these are still better than the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which most of you might be upgrading from. So you'll see a good performance no matter what chip you have. Finally, we got one last game for FPS gamers out there. I tested Delta Force at 120 FPS HD setting, which all these phones easily manage. It's not like it's a tough game, but with FPS games, the most important thing is high refresh rate and stable smoothness, right? So taking a look at those metrics, all of these phones does very well. The temperature didn't reach 40 FPS at the end of the 10 minutes run, but usually each game lasts about 15 minutes or so, right? And I play 2 or 3 games each session. I don't see lags whatsoever in any of this phone, which is good. One thing I wanted to highlight lastly is the power metric. In this game, Mediatek averaged 6.1 watts compared to the much lower 3.8 watts on the Xiaomi. And this casts some doubt whether or not I should multiply the Xiaomi power by 2, because it probably uses dual cell battery. But if I need to, then thinking a handheld phone with limited passive cooling using 8 to 10 watts of power is quite crazy, honestly. But here's my explanation. So basically, if we check the battery usage figures right here, we can see that the Xiaomi is the most power efficient, pretty much using up 3% for every 10 minutes except for Genshin, which is an outlier at least in this test. Then the Oppo trails behind with about 5% battery drain, and the smaller 6000 mAh batteries here understandably uses more percentage. But I think it'll be easier for you to see how many hours we can game from a 100% charge on each phone here. So I've projected the numbers, and this is what we got. As expected, Xiaomi made a strong showing and more than 5.5 hours of gameplay, while Oppo averages around 4 hours of playtime. The smaller battery phones then managed around 3.5 hours or less depending on the game. So that's a solid improvement, except for some outlier on Oppo with Wuthering Waves and Xiaomi and Genshin there. Though keep in mind, this is a very rough estimate since there will be throttling if you play for longer than 30 minutes. So that's pretty much it for the breakdown. Let me know if there's anything I can improve here. Also, what other phones you want me to check out. Let's have a great conversation in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. I'm Kenneth, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.